Ramsey. I am so very pleased and proud to have Alan Wurtzel with me today. Alan is the former CEO of Circuit City, a store, by the way, Alan, where I bought more than my share of merchandise once upon a time.
Well, thank you very much.
Alan is also the author of a fabulous, fabulous new book called Good to Great to Gone. Alan, you can hold that up now. Good to Great to Gone. I think the title speaks for itself. As everyone watching this knows, Circuit City is no longer with us. And Good to Great to Gone, Alan, is really kind of a memoir of the lessons that you learned from the failure of Circuit City, right?
That's correct.
Let me ask you a question before. I want to give you an opportunity to reflect on some of the things you call habits of mind in the book, which I thought were fabulous. But a question before any of that, and that is this. Does failure make someone better?
I think so. I mean, I think people learn from their mistakes. And I think I learned more when Circuit City was in deep trouble shortly after I became CEO than I did when it was riding high and going great guns.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, not specific to Circuit City, but how some of the lessons can be used by others, because lots of industries, I'm in the radio space, primarily the media space, and we're undergoing our own transformation right now, our own challenge and our own disruption. And you've got some items in your book called Habits of Mind, and I want to pick on a few of those to give you an opportunity to explain them because I think they're particularly apt for my audience.
Good.
One is run humble or be humble, run scared. What do you mean by that?
Absolutely. Well, I think that if there's one that's really important, that's probably the most important. The book is about strategy and making business strategy and making good or bad business strategy and how that happens. And the most important thing about humility is that the world is always changing, and businesses need to change to be current and to be relevant to their customers. And when they stop being humble and running scared, they tend to stop tracking their customers and thinking about what do I need to do next to capture the changes that are occurring in the world and continue to make the business relevant to customers.
How do you balance that with the obligation that many in an industry feel, certainly in broadcasting feel, to crow about the strengths of their medium, the strengths of their industry? You know, yeah, okay, Pandora is a big deal, but radio reaches almost 100% of everybody. And there's
Right.
that on the one hand is very true, but on the other hand, I would think it can create a certain sense of ignorance.
Well, one of the habits of mind or the relevant habit of mind in that case, it's not one that's in the book, is don't drink your own whiskey.
That should have been in the book.
And the point is, sure, you can think you're in a great industry and things are going well, and you want to promote either yourself or your company or your industry, but that doesn't mean you have to believe your own propaganda. You need to understand the weaknesses of your position, and you may be doing great, but you have to be humble and understand and run scared that can change at any minute.
Mm-hmm. That relates to another one of your habits of mind called encourage debate, which means allowing for dissent and discussion and debate. And I see some challenge there too in our space. I've been subject to it myself in some occasions where people essentially they hear the dissent and they say, well, you're not an asset for radio, for example. You're not pro radio. You're not good for the industry. I mean,
Right.
there is that tension. I mean, how do you navigate that?
Well, I mean, from a CEO standpoint, I think it's great to have debate. I didn't want yes men on my board, and I didn't want yes men, in the company. I wanted their best independent thinking. The way I ran the company was all the people reporting to me met once a month for an executive committee meeting, which is where the big decisions were made. We had an agenda, it would take all day, sometimes into the evening, to go through everything and keep talking until we reached consensus. If we didn't reach consensus, I'd put it down for the next month and the next month, until the point that I believed we were repeating ourselves. Once there are no new ideas, no new information, then somebody has to make the decision. That was the CEO's responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So in that process, in every case, the dissenting ideas always had some merit.
Mm-hmm.
They may not have been enough merit to carry the day, with me or with others, but they had enough merit that those who did carry the day modified their thinking, adjusted their plans, took account of the objections in going forward, so that going forward was done in a better way.
Mm-hmm. One of your other habits of mind, curiosity sustains the cat. Can you talk about what you mean there?
Sure. Strategic decision making is the art and practice of aligning the strengths of your organization, the financial strengths, the management strengths, the talents within the organization, to the outside world. Now, the outside world is always changing. Mm-hmm. Customer tastes are changing. Customer types are changing. The population's getting older. The population's getting more this or more that. And you need to be curious about what's happening in the outside world. So you pick up early warning signals mm-hmm. that demographics or customer habits are changing. I mean, Circuit City was set in its ways in serving older customers in the 80s and early 90s. Young kids, teenage kids, had money in their pocket, and they were starting to be the major purchasers of consumer electronics. We decided not to carry video games. We decided not to emphasize CDs. Our competition did that. They were more curious. They were more adventurous in trying to understand what the new customer wanted, and they were serving that customer need. Whereas Circuit City was serving yesterday's customer, and within 6 or 8 years, the kids were no longer coming to us anymore, or the next generation, because we were old fuddy-duddies and other people were with it.
That's a very relevant point for broadcasting, because as you know, in things like talk radio, for example, a lot of the audience is older, a lot of the hosts are older, a lot of the content is older, a lot of the appeal is older. And the question is, are people going to wake up who happen to be 25 today and turn on to that content? And the answer is probably no, right?
But if we'd been more curious, we would have worked harder to understand that trend and maybe made different decisions.
Let me ask a question about that, because there's a lot of data out there showcasing, highlighting trends. There are industries built to provide insight into trends. And what I kind of see lacking sometimes is, well, you hand me all these statistics, but now I have to understand what to do with them, because knowing that young people want to download MP3s is one thing, but knowing strategically what I do with that is something altogether different. How do you cross that divide?
I believe one of the habits of mind in the book is to make a roadmap, to know where you're going. And the way we did it, we did strategic planning every other year. If you do it every year, you add a year, drop a year, it becomes sort of repetitive, and not enough water has gone under the bridge for you to see the difference between this year and last year. But if you wait a year, you wait a couple of years, now you look back and say, oh, the plans I made 2 years ago, they didn't work out, which they never do. But it can be better or worse, but they never work out exactly as you plan. And you can say, oh, well, why? Now there's enough time to begin to understand why they didn't work out the way I thought, and to study that and to learn from that. Strategic planning, the way we did it anyway, is a 3-month exercise in which the CEO spends a very significant amount of time personally trying to understand what's happening in the world with economics, with demographics, with competition, with new products, with new customers, new geography. All these things require, they can't be delegated. I mean, you can delegate help and assistance to bring him the relevant data, but he has to understand it and make the decisions. And if you do it that way, then I think you don't fall into the trap you're talking about, because getting a lot of statistics is one thing, understanding it is the key.
Agreed. One of the last habit of mine I wanted to ask you about is the final one on your list, which is focus on the future. That seems like something that everyone should be doing automatically, isn't it?
Well, maybe should, but I don't think that happens in the real world. Too many businesses are focused on next quarter's earnings, next year's earnings, and not on the earnings 3 to 5 years down the pike. Detroit, the American car industry was the icon of global business. And General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler all went through terrible times. They lacked humility because they didn't focus on the future. They thought they had the answers. They weren't humble. They didn't run scared. They believed that Detroit's the greatest. And those Japanese that we beat in World War II, how could they know better what the American customer wants? How could they build a better automobile? They weren't curious, they didn't study, and they weren't humble. And that led to their demise.
Well, how do you focus on the future when you've got your boss on your tail about this week's revenue, let alone this month or this quarter, when you've got Wall Street on your tail?
Well, Wall Street, let's start with Wall Street, because that's a very pernicious influence. I think you got to tell Wall Street, I'm running this business, not you. I welcome your input. I'm happy to tell you what we're doing that's appropriate, but I'm making the decisions for the long run for the shareholders. And the shareholders I care about are not the shareholders that flip in and out every week or every month, or in today's world, every 30 seconds with high-speed trading. We're interested in the permanent, the long-term shareholder base and what's in their best interest. How will they be better off 3 to 5 years down the road? So you just have to ignore a lot of the Wall Street input that wants you to do something to change the price of the stock this afternoon or next week. So I guess that's the basic answer.
So what about your boss? Your boss has expectations for you, right?
You either have to try to educate your boss and get him on the same page, or leave and find a new boss. I mean, I don't think you can be successful in doing the good strategy in an organization that doesn't take a long-range view. And that organization is probably not going to be here in the long term. So it's in your self-interest.
And Alan Wurtzel knows what he's talking about. He's the former CEO of Circuit City and author of a terrific new book called Good to Great to Gone. Alan, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for this opportunity.